Hey, what's up guys, Rip here. So today this is going to be a bit of a React Andy video where we're going to look at Nux Taku's latest response to the Taiga situation. This is, I believe, the 5th or 6th attempted apology regarding Taiga. Now, I'm not trying to beat a dead horse here, but I know a lot of you guys are interested in what's going on here and any updates regarding this situation involving Taiga and by proxy, Nux Taku's involvement with that. And today we have another response from Nux, a much more direct response than we've seen. We're going to take a look at that. But before we get into things, if you want the full breakdown of everything, you can look at my previous two videos. It's much more in depth. But today we're just going to check out the latest response. And to give you a very quick rundown of the timeline here before we start, essentially a couple years ago, a vtuber by the name of Taiga was facing a series of allegations. Shortly after that, Nux Taku in a video with Moist Critical would make a statement about Taiga, making defamatory remarks about him, and then he would leave a pinned comment saying he will adjust things possibly if he finds anything from an investigation that was currently taking place involving those allegations facing Taiga. A few months after that, Taiga was exonerated of all those claims by an independent investigator, and then after that we wouldn't hear from Nux for about a year and a half until he mentioned vaguely what was going on in a video on the Some Ordinary podcast channel. And then recently we've heard multiple responses from Nux on Kick, because recently Taiga was removed from several platforms, but on Twitch, Taiga's been talking about everything that's been happening to him, including Nux's role in some of the harassment that Taiga's been facing over the years. So now we have this response right here. You can see it actually has Taiga in the thumbnail. It says, "Awful situation." So a lot of people looked at this and said, wow, this is a dedicated Taiga video. But if you click on it, you notice that the first time Taiga is mentioned is 18 minutes into the video, which a lot of people are critical of, because in the past attempts at an apology, people were critical of the fact that there was no standalone video and that Nux was responding or talking about Taiga deep into videos that weren't even relevant to Taiga in the first place, whether it was on the Some Ordinary podcast episode where it was about Mala Max and he talked about Taiga for about a minute, 20 minutes into the video, or in the recent Kick streams where he was talking about Taiga 30, 40, 50 minutes into a stream about a totally different topic. However, this time, yes, it is later in the video, but at least it is relevant to what's going on. So basically this video is talking about the unfair treatment of VTubers and gives several examples and eventually concludes with Taiga. Now, I think it is relevant. There's definitely a lot of bad things going on with VTubers, especially how they're treated very unfairly by various platforms. But let's hear what Nux has to say about not only Taiga, but also these other topics I just mentioned.
Now, finally, I would like to address the elephant in the room. I want to talk about the very wrongful termination of Bungo Taiga's YouTube channel and why I think spreading the word for him to get reinstated is very important. First, we must talk backstory. In July 2022, Taiga was accused of grooming, pedophilia, abusing his mods, racism, transphobia, asking for the lewds of a 17-year-old when he was 19, and commissioning shota hentai, which is lolly porn of little anime boys, and being inappropriate with his community in regards to the shota stuff. Now,
So that is the accusations that Taiga was facing. This is before Nux spoke. That was what Taiga was facing. We know later he'd be exonerated of these claims, but that's what was going on at the moment.
This isn't a Bungo Taiga video. I'm just trying to set the stage so you understand basically the story here. But after these accusations dropped, Taiga left the internet for about 5 months, and
Again, I've talked about this in other videos. This is the frustrating part of Nux's responses. He continues to get very basic information wrong. Taiga did not leave the internet for 5 months after these allegations were made. They kept streaming, they kept making content. It was a 5-month break that took place in 2024 when Taiga attempted his own life. That was at the beginning of this year. So that 5-month break has nothing to do. It didn't happen back then. So it's very frustrating to see that still being claimed over and over again. It's been claimed by Nux like 4 or 5 times at this point in recent times.
was on a video with Charlie where we were talking about corporate VTuber drama, like the HoloLive dramas and the Niji dramas before the Niji dramas really went nuclear. And when he asked me about Taiga, I said, I don't know the full story, but apparently he's a pedo. He
also said that he allegedly groomed the supposed victim in that situation who ended up being the harasser, but that's just a detail I want to add in there.
Wildly irresponsible making a claim like that, as there was not sufficient evidence for that. The DMs that were leaked were not of that and 2 months later, Taiga was exonerated of the grooming allegations by a private eye that he hired, and
Again, this is like maybe the third or fourth time he's made that false claim. Taiga did not hire the investigator. The investigator was an independent investigator who saw this situation and went into it thinking Taiga was guilty. They were trying to amass a document that would show Taiga's guilt. However, after they looked through the evidence, they realized this was wrong. Taiga not only was not the monster that they were portraying him as in these allegations, Taiga was actually the victim of this situation where the people making these allegations were not only being malicious and trying to lie, they were also doing it to specifically harm Taiga and his reputation.
Made a huge fuck up. Without hyperbole, this was the biggest mistake of my career, and I am deeply, deeply sorry for spreading misinformation and for causing any undue hate to be sent Taiga's way. I am sorry for how I handled that. I'm sorry for how I said it. I have tried to do better since then, and I will continue to try to do better in the future. Anywho, I immediately apologized to Taiga privately, as well as cut that portion out of the video. I added a pinned comment explaining my...
So, again, I don't know if this was intentional, but this is another mistake in the timeline. Like, it is frustrating to believe that he still doesn't understand the timeline of events. He is showing this pinned comment on the video as if this was made after Taiga was exonerated. But this was made before the exoneration was made. And you can see the edits. The edits that happened to this don't refer to the investigation being over. In fact, you can see boldly, it says there's a private investigator working on this. So it was still active when he made this pinned comment, and none of the edits would clarify that. So if he's trying to phrase this whole thing as he made the pinned comment after the exoneration, that is not true. He did not make any changes to the pinned comment after the exoneration was made. In fact, the next time we would hear about it was nearly a year and a half later with the Some Ordinary podcast episode, which I think he's going to mention next.
Mistake. I also apologized again publicly on our podcast in the first 10 minutes of an episode, which, by the way, got way more views than the video where I originally peddled the false allegation. Maybe not sub-count.
So, again, he's made this same weird claim multiple times. He keeps saying over and over again, the Some Ordinary podcast episode has more views than the original video where he collabed with Charlie and said those things about Taiga. It's not true. They have the exact same number of views. I showed this in my previous video. They are sitting within often 1,000 views of each other. And also, even if the podcast had more views, it still got 350,000 views, the original video where he said these things about Taiga. And by the time there was even a pinned comment added, it already had hundreds of thousands of views. Like, the damage was done. So going back to this point for like the fourth or fifth time is frustrating to see. He's trying to downplay the effect of that original video. It is your biggest L, Nux. Don't try to downplay what happened here. But
wise, but relevancy-wise, the Some Ordinary podcast was my biggest platform. I'll play the clip here because somehow people don't know this exists. I
think some people don't know this exists because it's buried not 10 but 20 minutes into a random episode on your Some Ordinary podcast. And it's not about Taiga. You can see the title right down here. It says Mama Max keeps making things worse. It was talking largely about Mama Max and some Pal World drama and stuff like that. There was a tangent 20 minutes in where they were talking about false allegations, where Nux would bring up his mistake with false allegations. And here's what he's playing in his version of the clip.
Regret it because he I don't know if it's true. He ended up coming back with some sort of response. I don't know, this guy Bungo Taiga, and I apologized to him privately that I even alleged something like that, and because a friend told me, and I believed him. Every time this topic came up, I apologized, be it in streams or videos, as I really do try to take accountability when I screw up. 2 years later, in the present day, it seems like the public narrative is, I never apologized publicly.
Anyone who's trying to push that narrative is wrong. I think, though, the majority of people talking about this, in Taiga in particular, has made it clear you did attempt to apologize. It just wasn't done in a way that felt like it was any real accountability. You're burying it deep into a video that happened a year and a half after the whole situation occurred. And on top of that, there's no edits to the pinned comment. It only had, 100 or so likes on that pinned comment. It just didn't feel like it addressed in any sort of a significant way what happened with that comment that definitely did have influence. Like, Nux has influence, especially back then as well, where his comment caused a lot of people to harass Taiga and also people in the VTubing scene to not want to associate with Taiga. It was a pretty damaging thing to say, and yeah, it's carried true for a long time. But you did attempt to apologize, but that's not what people are angry about.
Is untrue. It also is that I refuse to talk about this, and I'm sweeping it under the rug. This is also untrue. But
to be fair, you talked about it a year and a half after the exoneration came out, and then you started recently talking about it on Kick because Taiga was raising it once again after they were removed from YouTube and Twitter. Taiga has been obviously very upset, and I've even seen instances of things that Nux has shown that Taiga said that I think were over the top in terms of maybe not the best thing to say on Twitter before they were suspended about Nux and some other people involved. But I understand why Taiga is so upset. But on top of that, you definitely did respond recently because there's been a lot of noise about your role in Taiga's career, right? I think that's the reason. Let's not kid ourselves. I think it's not, you didn't just choose a week ago to start talking about this again for the first time in months. It's because of all the noise recently and people also making videos about it and so on.
Also, in the wake of Taiga getting banned, people on YouTube seem to be blaming me for his
So, I want to look at this right here. So, this is a video I watched by Royalties here. I thought it was a very good video going over the situation where, ironically, the person making this video went into it believing the allegations against Taiga, but after doing their research, much like the independent investigator, they changed their mind and realized that Taiga was innocent of these claims. And I watched the video. I think in that, I don't think he directly blames Nux. He just says, like I have, that his comments played a role in the harassment campaign. It made people go out and harass Taiga and created a lot of negativity towards Taiga that has continued to this day. And on top of that, this video in particular focused a lot more on the stalkers and the people trying to mass report than Nux. That's just my view of that video. But anyways, let's continue.
In the wake of Taiga getting banned, people on YouTube seem to be blaming me for his unjust ban, which is wildly untrue as well. I think Taiga believes his channel was banned due to being mass reported by people harassing him. And I think that he thinks most of that harassment is coming from me. I very much don't believe either of those two things are the case. First of all, I don't think that after 2 years of a tangential mention of Taiga, which I f***ed up, and I admit I f***ed up, and I am sorry for plus the retraction of that statement and the apologies that I've made, I don't think it's my audience harassing Taiga right now.
Okay, so again, we can argue about whether there was an actual real retraction. I mean, he took down the portion of the video. He used the edit tool on YouTube to get rid of it after some time. But the thing is, there's still re-uploads of it everywhere, right? And you can't take back what people heard. So people heard 2 years ago through your video that Taiga was a predator. And you never cleared that up. And a lot of those people who heard it, they don't go investigating it themselves. They just trust your word. And now they just have this narrative in their head that whatever was being alleged is true. And they've never adjusted themselves. And I think this narrative going out of Taiga being these things that he was accused of was something that festered and it continued and expanded and it became settled. People just believed it. So I think, yes, you played a role in it, even though it was as you say, like a passing mention. It was still a very critical part of this whole situation. Nux is not solely responsible for everything, but he played a role. And that's what people like me are trying to say. And he has to recognize that what he said caused harm to Taiga's reputation in a pretty significant way that continues to this day.
And second of all, I spoke to people at YouTube about bans due to mass reporting specifically. They told me direct mass reporting channels does not get them banned under any circumstances. It may put them under a microscope to be reviewed by YouTube reviewers, and then for YouTube reviewers to decide about whether the channel should be banned or not for whatever reason, but the mass reporting does not incite the ban.
So I kind of tend to agree with what Nux is saying here. I don't think people just get banned flat out when they're mass reported. Everyone in this video right now talking has been mass reported. Me, Nux, and a lot of the other parties, okay? And any big YouTuber, no matter what you're talking about, even family-friendly channels have dedicated hate groups trying to mass report them. That's nothing new. But in this case, I think creating this narrative that Taiga is a predator based on false allegations and putting that notion out there leads to harassment, leads to people wanting to mass report Taiga, and that brings attention to Taiga's channel, where then they are unfairly treated because they are a VTuber. This whole video is talking about how YouTube is very, very draconian when it comes to applying their rules against VTubers specifically, especially if they have any sort of sexual content. He talks about this with other channels who have lewder content and get suspended in cases where other channels don't. And in this case with Taiga, the mass reporting is effective if it was happening because it's bringing it to YouTube's attention, and YouTube then cracks down with the hammer on channels like Taiga. So I think it is still relevant if there's mass reporting going on. It's not the sole reason, but with Taiga, it could actually lead to people looking at it and then treating him unfairly as a result.
There are a lot more cases of a lot more prominent and hated content creators that are still on YouTube, and quite frankly, maybe shouldn't be. So I saw some sussy-wussy clips of Taiga floating around, which is why I personally believe that it probably was a termination due to sexual content. Especially because it lines very, very well up with all these other VTubers that are literally getting ass blasted by YouTube for sexual content, like Shy Lily's clip channel. Do you know that a lot of debuts for...
So I want to correct that really quickly. So I talked about the Shy Lily clip channel Pierre multiple times in videos over the past couple of weeks. He frames this in the incorrect way, but based on the context, it's still relevant to what he's trying to say. He's saying that Pierre and that Shy Lily clip channel was taken down, banned on YouTube for sexual content, when that was not the case. It was nothing to do with sexual content. It was everything to do with impersonation. They were banned specifically for the reason of impersonation. And yes, it's not relevant to the overall point about lewd content and VTubers he's making here, but it is relevant to how VTuber clip channels are also treated very unfairly. I talked about that, like I said, a couple times recently, where at the minimum, a lot of clip channels face issues with the term reuse content being applied to their channel, which demonetizes them entirely. They can't make any revenue because they say this content doesn't belong to you. You can't redistribute it, but in many cases, they have the permission of the VTubers, and the VTubers want them to make ad revenue. And also, in the maximum here, we're seeing channels getting banned for impersonation because YouTube is thinking that they're trying to impersonate the VTuber they're sharing clips of. And in this case, it took multiple weeks of not only this clip channel going viral, begging for YouTube's assistance, but also Shy Lily made multiple viral tweets over this course saying they had permission to do this. And eventually, after literally having to go viral for 3 weeks straight, the channel was restored. But it was over impersonation, not sexual content. But in the grand scheme of VTubers, yes, there's multiple reasons VTubers are being treated unfairly and multiple VTuber type accounts on YouTube.
Hololive and Niji Sanji end up getting their accounts locked for sexual content. In the VTuber agency Mythos, Apollo and Hades, two content creators there, each got sexual content community guideline strikes on their channels for bull reasons, doing content that does already exist on YouTube, yet theirs got the strikes. Unfortunately, I think YouTube is very much dialing up its awful banning policies across the board, and I think VTubers are heavily caught in this crossfire.
So that was really the overall point of his video. He's going back to it now, and that point is not false. But I think when it comes to the portion about Taiga, a lot of people are going to be critical about the placement of it in the video, that this was an attempt to basically include it in a relevant topic, but push it back in the video. So as you can see, a lot of the comments are talking about YouTube censorship and not specifically Taiga. But in terms of responses, this is the most direct response about the Taiga situation we've seen from Nux, and there's a lot more accountability and denouncement of his former statements, a little more clear. But again, there's a lot of minor details that are wrong, and it's like the basic facts of what's going on, and it's frustrating to see all these years later and multiple attempts recently, and he's still harping on certain points that are just completely untrue and like very easily disprovable. But at the end of the day, you can probably see in like the thumbnail, it says "the end?" ? Because really, this is going to have no real end. I don't know if Nux is going to talk about this more, but the real kind of determiner of whether this is over or not, I guess, would be Taiga. You know, I can feel whatever I want to feel. This is really between Nux and Taiga, and I'm the one just kind of reporting on things to help give some clarity to people who are interested in this situation. But whether Taiga accepts this, I don't know, but eventually it's really up for them to decide, and this is the latest update on this. This is, again, the trilogy so far in the situation, and I don't know if I'll be covering this anymore because we're kind of beating a dead horse, but I wanted to give some updates because this was a significant response from Nux in regards to this situation. So that's going to do it for this video. As always, I hope you guys enjoyed. Please feel free to share your thoughts about today's topics in the comments section down below. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.